I'm gonna break down how I created this snowstorm scene in Blender. First, I'll sculpt the terrain, refining it further and further while keeping the accurate real-world scale in mind. I have a very specific idea of how I want this to look, so I'm trying to match that as closely as I can. I'll add in some terrain tracks and a bridge between two hills in the distance as well. Then I'll start working on the lighting and atmosphere, which in this scene is very important for the snowy blizzard feel. I did so using some exponential height fog. So I added a large cube and then used a separate XYZ on a texture coordinates object output to get a gradient that I can then use to control the brightness and density of the fog. Brightness and density because I'm using a principled volume added together with an emission shader. Then I'll just add a basic texture to the landscape. The important thing here is to use real displacement because else the snow that we're gonna add would look very flat and boring, which conveniently is the next step. I first need to create a snow material. For that I'll just add a principled BSDF with some subsurface scattering, noise texture into the roughness and also the bump. Then to mix it in realistically, I'll use a geometry node's normal output plugged into a separate XYZ. On its own, the shader-based snow isn't enough, so I'll improve it by duplicating the ground and inflating it slightly using a displace modifier, then just giving it that same snow material. And that covers everything except the train tracks. For them, I'll be using the real snow add-on, which can automatically add snow buildup to a selected object. And after that, I'm very happy with how the snow looks. So that means I can move on to adding some trees, shrubs, sticks, grass, and rocks to the landscape. Scaling them down, the closer they get to the train tracks. Now, even though I have removed all the leafy bits from the plants, they still don't look wintry enough. So to fix that, I'll add some shader-based snow buildup to them as well. Either using the normal and separate XYZ method or using the base color of the plant passed through a color ramp. Then for the bridge, I'll model some additional railings and add a concrete and metal material. Now, I was considering just leaving it like this, but it needs a character in my opinion. So I used this model of a rust scientist and modified it by removing a lot of its gear as well as making it all black with some snow. Then I added a Mixamo walking animation, which at first didn't look cinematic enough. So I slowed it down a bit and reduced the swinging of the arms because that kind of just seemed too happy. Then I placed the character in the scene and made the camera follow him. Okay, so in my opinion, the scene looks great now, but just to be sure, I'll gather some feedback. The result of this is that I feel like I should add a backpack. So I placed this model from Sketchfab here on the character's back, parented it to one of his backbones, and added some snow. With that, I feel like the scene itself is done. But for it to look right, we have to do some crucial things in compositing. First, I'll mix in a blurred version of the render into itself to give it a dreamier, snowier look. Then I'll mix in a lot more mist using the Z-depth pass, as well as adding some falling snow that I rendered out in a separate blend file. And lastly, I'll add some film emulation, which I think for this scene made a pretty big difference. By the way, you can also pick this node group up for yourself for just $1 on my Gumroad. Link in the description. And lastly, after some color grading, the scene is finally done. So here is the final render. Thanks for watching.